Welcome back. Okay, so news of the day from today. There haven't been trades yet, but the day's still young, right? We're gonna end up seeing some trades today, and the waiver wire tells you that there's some teams getting ready, where they're waiving players for the purpose of trading, or hey, if you want this guy, let us know. Because he's available. So there will be a hearing today for Michael McCarron. He'll get a hearing for a head check on Yanni Gourde in yesterday's game against Tampa Bay Lightning. Since it's a hearing, we know it's a suspension. I'll guess 2 games because that seems to be the default right now as 2 games, and then they'll make it 1. So there was a lot of talk yesterday about the Canucks. So they announced that they're coming back on April 16th. They're able to practice today if they've cleared all their health protocols. And they have 19 games in 31 days. It is going to be a pretty brutal end of the season. But hey, it's been that kind of year. And odds are that other teams that have gone through this as well are going to say, yep, yeah, that sounds about right. Montreal, Dallas, Buffalo, New Jersey, these teams all come to mind, right? So now the season will end on May 16th for the North Division. So there's going to be games right from now until May 16th. There's actually, I think, May 14th. There's no games that day. But the latest that we see a game in any of the other divisions is Boston against Washington on May 11th. So between May 11th and May 16th, there's no games. And that's the only game involving American teams after May 10th. The schedule originally was supposed to end May 8th. Now, right now, the NHL's probably holding its breath because if we have another team have any kind of a shutdown, there's no way they'll be able to accommodate that team. Because you're looking at least a week and a half, 2 weeks down, right? And there just isn't enough time to finish out the schedule. So right now, the pressure's on the players to keep things as safe as possible, which is tough when it isn't necessarily players doing anything wrong. And that's what was said by the Canucks team doctor yesterday. The biggest rumor is that likely one of the players was in Whistler during their week off, and that's where this came from. And they're allowed to go out when they're at home. When they're on the road, they have very strict rules. But yeah, they had the week off. They were allowed to go out to Whistler. There's certain guidelines they have to follow, but the risk is there. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with the playoffs. The NHL hasn't announced what they're doing with the playoffs because this does kind of leave things in a bit of a bind, right? Do you take the American teams and shelve them for a week? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that the playoffs will start for the American teams on probably the 14th or 15th, and they'll probably start it for the Canadian teams on, I'll say, the 18th. So then there's only a few days in between, and then they'll schedule it so that everything synchronizes once we reach round 2. So the American teams will probably, and again, I'm just guessing here, probably give them a couple of extra days before round 1, a couple extra days before round 2. Again, dependent on the schedule ending for all of them, May 10th or May 11th. So the original date being May 8th means we're right around where the NHL thought we'd end up. They had a 7 to 10 game or 7 to 10 day. I'll get there. 7 to 10 day cushion, right? That they believed that they could, throw games in there if they had to and push things back. But the plan is still to award the Stanley Cup before the middle of July. And then you get into expansion and you get into all that other fun stuff. Because they want to get it done before the Olympics this summer. So yeah, there you go with that. And we'll see how things go for the Canucks with that really, really busy schedule. None of the Canucks have opted out. There's always the option for players to opt out. To date, none of them have expressed interest to Jim Benning in opting out of the rest of the season. They know there's some players that will not be 100%. They will not be able to come back by next Friday. They're aware that I think it's 3 or more that they know will not be able to come back. Virtanen's been mentioned as one of them. I would think that the last names that got thrown on that list, so look at like Nate Schmidt, Virtanen's on that list. Some of the guys who tested positive the latest will likely be the latest to come back. That just makes sense, right? So yeah, it's going to be an interesting ride from here. Nikita Gusev, he signs in Florida. He signed for 1 year, $1 million. By 1 year, it means the rest of the season. So he's staying in the NHL for the rest of this season with Florida. It's a really smart move by the Florida Panthers because it could work. And if it doesn't work, well, it's a roster spot. It's a prorated $1 million contract. You're just throwing money at this guy to see what he can do. And again, it could be a very smart move. Think of Zach Bogosian last year. Zach Bogosian last year gets bought out by Buffalo, goes to Tampa, wins the Stanley Cup. So it can really work out quite well. And so we'll see if it works out for Gusev as well, being bought out by, or well, not bought out, but his contract terminated by the New Jersey Devils and then going to Florida. He's got to feel pretty good about that, right? So yeah, best of luck to him. I still think he's just underachieved this year, and I thought last year he was a good player. So we'll see whether or not he can do anything in Florida. He better have his foot speed ready, because that is a fast team. So the waiver wire's busy today. I didn't put everybody up here who's on waivers today, but it's close. Alex Biega, Danny DeKeyser waived by Detroit. I think both of them are available via trade, and once they've cleared, I guess it gets easier. And I don't think either of them get picked up. DeKeyser's contract, I think, will keep any team from picking him up, and Biega has been waived many times in his career. Mete, waived by Montreal. That had to raise some eyebrows, because again, there are those in the fandom of the Montreal Canadiens who believe in Mete. And personally, I wouldn't mind seeing a team that I cheer for picking up Victor Mete. That's always kind of the bar that I set is, would I feel good about him coming to a team I cheer for based on what I've seen of him in his play? Yeah, I think Mete's still young enough. I don't think he's going to be a top 4 guy, but he's still young enough that he can develop, and might be fun to see him playing in another squad and see if that helps him. And Vatanen has been waived by New Jersey, which surprised me. I really was quite surprised to see Vatanen on the waiver wire today. But again, New Jersey might be looking at making a trade, and he may be on his way out. So, on to other hockey news. Adin Hill gets his 10th straight start for the Arizona Coyotes. So the Coyotes, who are still battling it out for 4th place with St. Louis, and they've had a rough go of it here and there. They have a tandem of Adin Hill and Prosvetov is their backup, because both Kemper and Ronta are hurt. If I had told you, hey, look, so Kemper and Ronta are both going to get hurt, but Arizona is still going to be in the hunt for a playoff spot with a month to go, you probably would have rightfully said, that doesn't sound right. And even I myself am kind of surprised to see that. But Hill's played pretty well. We'll see whether or not they reward him at the end of this season by giving him a permanent roster spot or not. But Hill's played pretty well, and it's his 10th straight start. So good on him over this shortened schedule. He's playing a lot, and he's not going to complain. Goaltenders don't generally complain when they're playing too much. It's rare. It happens, but it's rare. So best of luck to him and to the Arizona Coyotes, because it really doesn't get easier from here. Cody Golubev, who's been playing in the AHL, he has now signed a 2-way prorated contract for the rest of the season with Ottawa. So they have to put him on waivers, because that's what happens when you sign a guy before the end of the year. It's only notable because Golubev he's capable of playing at the NHL level as a fill-in, as a number 6-7 guy. And so it's possible they bring him up for the end of the season and just take a look, right? So we'll see what happens with the Ottawa Senators. And, yeah, best of luck to Golubev. Interesting news out of LA as well. First off, Todd McClellan's saying it's going to be a quiet deadline. And that's after last year LA was quite noisy at the deadline. And part of the reason is because Rob Blake wants to keep these guys around. He wants to keep Iafallo, and he's had talks with Athanasiou as well. The plan is, and he's put in offers on both guys, the plan is to try to keep them and build with what they have right now. The Kings are in an interesting spot where it feels like the worst of it's done, that last year was probably the worst of it for their rebuild, and that now they're ready to start building up. But you've got to keep those veteran guys around if you're planning on building up the following season. You can't just keep, getting rid of everybody at the deadline, because then you don't have that veteran presence for the kids when they come up the next season. So Iafallo's still young as well. And yeah, he's been pretty good lately. So good time to get hot is when your contract's up. And so we'll see. We'll see whether or not they keep him or they trade him, because the idea is if they can't sign him before the deadline, then they'll trade him, make sure they don't lose him for nothing. Although Athanasiou is an RFA after this season. So we'll see if that increases his value, because whoever gets him, They keep control over them. The Columbus Blue Jackets. So some interesting things with Columbus. And the reason I'm wearing LA. I was gonna wear Columbus. I thought about it, but I thought against it because I've worn Columbus a lot lately, and I thought, well, we'll see with the Kings whether or not they can keep everybody. So Columbus wants a first-round pick for Foligno. They got a first-round pick for Savard. This year, again, it feels like it's more of a lottery draft, and I'm not talking about the draft lottery. It is a lottery draft. Like it is going to be you're picking players on how they played over what it might have been a 20-game season, a 30-game season. Over a season that's had all these stops and starts along the way. So it may lean towards players, say, in the college system who, or players who are on the U.S. side of things who maybe haven't had the stops and starts that players on the Canadian side of the border have had. It may lean towards them having a higher ranking on draft day, and then we look back 5 years later and go, actually, these guys were diamonds in the rough, but they only played 20 games that year. So more picks in the draft is where teams, I think, are going to be looking for this year. So that's what Columbus wants. They just got another first-round pick. They want another first-round pick for Foligno after the one they got for Savard. We'll see who's willing to give up a first. Toronto's been very clear that they're willing to give up a top prospect. They're willing to give up a first. Amirov is a name that I keep hearing out there. And it's possible Amirov has got the kind of stock that makes him worth pretty big player going to Toronto, but we'll see whether or not Columbus can get it. I'll wake up. I'll get there. I swear. It's just Colorado on the brain from the first video today, right? Tortorella. Tortorella's interview, and again, he's interesting in interviews. It's a similar state that he seems to think Columbus is in to the one that he had, the opinion he had of the Canucks when he was here. Which was, well, let it go. Let go of 2011. It's not happening again. Let it go. It's got kind of the opinion that they just need to blow this up. That was his opinion of the Canucks when he was in Vancouver. And, in hindsight, and even at the time, I kind of agreed with him. But in Columbus, he talks a lot about, maybe it's the wrong mix here. And like in the interview yesterday, it was before the game yesterday, they had this interview with him. Basically along the lines of that it's tough when you know you're out of it. To get up for every game, and he understands it's tough for some of the players as well, and that maybe it's time to start over. And he talked about starting over, but for me with Columbus, I don't know what that's going to exactly look like with starting over, and I don't know that Tortorella's behind the bench next year. Just the way that he's talking and the way things are going in Columbus, I would be very surprised if he's still behind the bench next year. But again, a lot of the things he's saying about Columbus right now sound very much like the way he was talking about the Vancouver Canucks after his one season in Vancouver. And so we'll see. We'll see how long he sticks around in Columbus and whether or not they do start over. I don't think it's that bad that they need to start over. But I do think that from what he's saying, it's possible you have some strain in the locker room. Some strain between players. It's the kind of stuff that'll come out after that we'll find out next year and years beyond. Oh, wow, these two players really hated each other. And there was this group on this side and this group on that side. Man, that was a really fractured locker room. Just the way he's talking, it sounds similar to the kind of talk we hear around teams when they're in that fractured environment. So for Columbus, at least, there's 1 month left in the season, and then that's the end of it, and then we'll see what happens. But I can't see Tortorella coming back next year. And yeah, we'll see what Columbus does. And what does starting over look like? Like how do you get into the younger players and trade them out? Do you say, all right, we'll listen to offers on Korpisalo? What does that look like? Does that constitute starting over? Because last summer we even heard talk about whether or not Korpisalo or Merzlikins might end up being gone out of Columbus. So yeah, there's a lot of questions about Columbus, and we'll see how that turns out. All right. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.